In this video, I'm going to give the basics of phylogeny since it'll be helpful to understand most of my content. Then I'll answer the world's most important question: am I a fish? This video will have minimal visuals, so feel free to listen to it like it's a podcast. Phylogenetics sounds like a complicated word, but it's not too bad. It's just about grouping life by their DNA rather than morphology, which is how they look. Phylogeny is super useful if we want to figure out how everything evolved and how one organism relates to another on the tree of life. This is a hominid family tree. Let's start with Homo on the top right, which is us. That's right, I'm a Homo, and that's not even my scientific name. If you're comprehending this video, you're probably Homo sapiens, which is the only living species in our genus left. There used to be more like the famous Homo erectus. Our closest living relative is the Pan genus, which consists of chimpanzees and bonobos. Together, we make up the tribe Hominini. We have the closest common ancestor of any of the other genuses in Hominidae, which is illustrated by how close the line is that connects us. The sister tribe of Hominini is Gorillini, of which the only surviving genus is gorilla. You guessed it, that genus consists of the two species of gorillas. Gorillini and Gorillini and Hominini together make up the subfamily Homininae, which is sister to Ponginae. Ponginae's only surviving genus is Pongo, which consists of 3 species of orangutan. Altogether, we make up the family Hominidae. This chart shows that orangutans are the least closely related to the rest of Hominidae, and gorillas are more closely related than orangutans, but not as much as chimps and humans. Not every phylogeny is lopsided like this, but a lot of them are. I think it has to do with derived organisms doing better and having more diversity, but that's just my guess, and I have as much authority on the topic as a 6th grader. I finished my junior year in college, but what I'm studying has absolutely nothing to do with this. Clade is a word I'm probably going to use a lot, which basically just means taxon, which basically just means a monophyletic group of organisms, which basically just means a group of organisms that contains a common ancestor and all its descendants. The most important thing about phylogeny is common ancestors and when they've diverged in relation to the others in the group. Monophyly is a really important concept, so I'll explain that in more detail now. Like I said, a monophyletic group is one earliest common ancestor and all its descendants. But there's 2 different ways a group could be incorrectly organized or not monophyletic. A polyphyletic group has more than one unrelated ancestor, and an example of that would be Insectivora, which was a group of all the shrew-looking animals that was found to be incorrect thanks to genetic studies. Now it's Eulipotyphla, which is shrews, moles, hedgehogs, and their ilk, which is pretty distantly related to Afrosoricida, some shrew-looking things from Africa that look like Eulipotyphlans due to convergent evolution. Speaking of convergent evolution, that's a whole other concept to describe when distantly related things converge on the same design. An easier example of that is how dolphins kind of look like sharks, probably because that shape works well for swimming fast. A more useful but non-scientific example of a polyphyletic group would be pets. Like dogs, cats, horses, sheep, and mice, just to name a few, aren't exactly closely related to each other compared to any other mammals, but they still form a useful though polyphyletic group. A paraphyletic group is instead missing descendants. A non-controversial example of that is reptiles before people figured out that birds were dinosaurs. Without birds, you're arbitrarily cutting out a group of dinosaurs from reptilia, when other closely related animals like crocodiles and turtles are still considered reptiles. This is, of course, where our fish problem arises. Fish moment, as mammals, we're also amniotes, which we share with reptiles, the sister clade to Mammalia. And no, we're not reptiles, though you might be able to make a case for it if you think stuff like Dimetrodon was a reptile. I would argue that it's not, and that it's just a reptile like Synapsid, which is the real sister clade to Sauropsid, which is reptiles, but this is way too complicated and not important when we're just talking about extant life. Okay, it's important enough for me to talk about it. Mammals are derived synapsids. The latter is defined with something to do with the skull and the holes in it. The main difference between crown group mammals and other synapsids is that the complicated bones in the jaw migrated to the ear to make the ear bones mammals have today. From my understanding, mammals also have more complicated tooth layouts with different purposes for different teeth. Sauropsids are also defined by their skulls, and crown group reptiles are defined by specific holes in their skulls. Not talking about reptiles today though. Amniotes are defined by our amniotic sac, which allows the eggs to breathe in air rather than needing to be underwater. Most mammals don't have eggs anymore, but amniotic sacs still help us do stuff in the placenta or something, I don't know. As amniotes, we're also tetrapods, which we share with amphibians. Are we amphibians because we evolved from amphibian-like animals? Maybe, but the mostly agreed upon term scientifically is tetrapod, and amphibians are non-amniote tetrapods. Tetrapods are defined by having 4 legs, though some groups have lost them, like lots of squamate reptiles, mainly snakes, and also cetaceans, which are whales. Most still have remnants of the legs they lost, though. As tetrapods, we're also vertebrates. Now this is where it gets saucy. Vertebrates pretty much equal fish, at least in a cladistical sense. Unless you think cyclostomates, which are hagfish and lampreys, aren't fish. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to call them fish. So not only did we descend from fish, we descended from fish in such a way that we're more closely related to some living fish than others. So if sharks, salmon, and coelacanths, just to pick random examples, are fish, then in a cladistical sense, we must be fish as well. It's a solid argument, and one that, as much as I'd like to disprove, I can't really. Just to clear up all the sciencey sounding names, Gnathostomata is jawed fish, Chondrichthyes is cartilaginous fish like sharks and rays, Euteleostomi is synonymous with Osteichthyes, which is bony fish, Actinopterygii is ray-fin fish like salmon and bass, and Sarcopterygii is lobe-fin fish like coelacanths and lungfish, but also including us. You might have noticed that I explained all those names with the word fish, as tetrapods were inarguably Sarcopterygii, Euteleostomi, and Gnathostomata. So if those are fish, then we must be fish too. The main reason I don't like that is because it takes away from how cool it is that birds are reptiles. If I say that to someone, they're like, "Did you know we're all fish?" And I'm like, yeah, I knew that. I don't know, I guess it comes down to your opinion on whether or not the scientific names equal the common names. Some other examples of that are how we're hominid catarrhine semiform primates, aka old world monkeys that are also apes. For some reason I totally understand being an ape and a monkey, but fish is a little wacky. I get it though, especially if fish just equals vertebrate. Realistically, fishes are a paraphyletic group that leaves out tetrapods and thus not a real phylogenetic or taxonomic group. The reason some people argue that Lissamphibia, the group that includes all living amphibians, is the only group of true amphibians and that other non-amniote tetrapods aren't amphibians is so we don't run into the same problem with them. I say F it though. If we're all fish, then we're amphibians too. That's all I got for this video though, thanks for watching. Check out my Patreon where you can support me and get your name at the end of my videos for just $1 a month. Thanks Captain Kobop, Art of Dying, and Mr. Kill. At some point in my life, I'll post a video about mammal phylogeny. This is just the beginning. Hope to see you there, and in my other videos. Thanks for watching.